back to the Irish Mags Show. It is episode 120. My name is Paul. I'll be your host. We've given Alan Williamson a very, very rare week off this week. I think he needs it.
He does.
He's been feeling the strain, as we all have after recent weeks as Newcastle United fans. But I am joined by Krisho. Krisho, just the two of us. Please don't sing.
I was just about to sing. But yeah, you're right. We definitely need. Al needs a break. I think I was with him in the Blicker Street for the Scumberland match, and I thought he was. Pretty much at breaking point. I really think we had to get him out of there. I think he was ready to explode. But we won't go into that. We'll try and keep positive. Oh no, wait, we can't keep positive because Ireland. Oh yeah, right. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, I know. It's been a horrendous week from a football following perspective for us as Newcastle fans, as Ireland fans. I even played a football match last Saturday and I lost that too. So 3 for 3 in a 7-day period.
Wow.
We are recording this currently. It's 81 minutes. Republic of Ireland 0, North Macedonia 0. And interestingly, Czech Republic are drawing 1-1 against Denmark in the game we should be in, bar that penalty shootout. So part of me just wants Denmark to go through to make me feel better, but it won't really.
No, I don't think so either. But look, at one positive. Let's keep positive here. We've got to keep positive because I know Al will watch this back and we need to kind of keep pumping and blowing some positive air into him. Do it for Al. But Alanga scored for Sweden.
Alanga scored and a lovely goal as well. I'd like to see him do that a bit more for us. Very calm and composed, which he hasn't been in a Newcastle kit this season. He always looks a bit panicky and a bit like, what the hell am I doing here?
What's this ex-striker of ours playing tonight? I didn't check. I never look for his name anymore.
No, I don't. Well, he's still injured, isn't he? I believe.
Is he still injured? Yikes.
As far as I know, he's still injured. He didn't even make that squad. So, knowing Liverpool, he'll probably make it back when they get to like the semi-final of the Champions League, and he'll score a hat-trick or something just to put a cherry on our season.
And then they'll sell it to Barcelona. They'll sell it to Barcelona.
And I'd be okay with that. Well, I don't know. I don't think they'll get that money for him. But anyway, we're not going to talk about Alexander Isak, and we're not going to talk about football on the pitch, at least, because there is no football to talk about. We do have a game coming up, the return after the international break, but it's still a little while away. So let's just not talk about football, Chris Show. And on the day we record this, it's probably a good thing because everything is happening from a Newcastle United perspective off the pitch.
Yes.
Anybody that woke up this morning, we are recording Tuesday, the 31st of March. Fucking all hell broke loose across the Newcastle United Twitter and every WhatsApp group I'm in as Newcastle United announced their 2024-25 accounts. And with a few interesting nuggets, made even more interesting by the fact that there is some events that have taken place in the last year that no journalist reported on, that there was no sniffs or rumors about. And that is that Newcastle United, we'll talk about the financial results, but the big standout event that took place seemingly back in June, 3 days before the old PSR window closed, the financial calendar, is that we did a Chelsea apparently, and we sold St. James's Park to ourselves.
Our sister company.
To our subsidiary that was apparently established only a few days before we sold it to them on paper, at least. I'm sure most people have heard about this, maybe haven't looked into it. So we're going to pull it apart. Myself and Krisho have been digging into this with a fine-tooth comb. I was actually looking at this morning. I was doing a bit of research on it for another task that I was working on, let's say. What appears to have happened here is similar to what Chelsea have done. On paper, we have sold the stadium, not the land, as far as I could see, Krisho, because apparently the club don't own the land, but the stadium itself and any rights to do with the building and the development of the stadium on that site and some adjacent land nearby as well, all have been sold to a subsidiary of Newcastle United, a subsidiary being basically another company on paper. The exact name apparently is PZ Newco Holdings Limited, which seemingly that abbreviation apparently is linked to another project, something about the stadium. I can't remember what it's called. But it is controlled majority by the Saudi PIF group. So we've ultimately, on paper, sold the stadium to ourselves, or to at least a company controlled by our owners. I can't remember the exact figure, Krisha, if you have it to hand. Was it 170 million?
I think they made 130 million off it because of some expenses around the 75-year lease that was on So what you're saying about
Yes, indeed.
the land is leased by the Newcastle City Council
Yeah.
to Newcastle United Football Club. Look, this is interesting in the sense that the frustration that came this morning, and we'll get into the accounts like Paul said in a minute, but the frustration here is that if this would have been done before we had to sell Minta and Anderson, we wouldn't have had to have sold them. So why didn't anyone come up with this idea of making this 130 million profit? We would have saved our arses. We wouldn't have had to sell Anderson and Minta. So it's incredibly frustrating that this has gone ahead now. Yes, it's great for, obviously, like I said, we'll talk about the accounts. It's good for the money coming in. And it's also a very, very clever thing to do in the sense that anything that we do around St. James's Park or building a new stadium won't have a direct impact on Newcastle United Football Club because it's two separate entities. So they can do whatever they wish with this entity because it's not held against the Premier League rules. Okay, UEFA might have something to say about the money we made off it, but whatever they do with this sister company, they can do whatever they wish with it. They can give it a loan for £1 billion if they want. It won't affect anything to do with Newcastle United Football Club. So it's very clever. It's a little bit late, but it's a very clever move by the club. Very clever.
Yeah, I was looking at the quotes. I think our chief financial officer, Simon Capper, there's a quote from him saying that the motivation was very much to reorganize our property assets, get them into the correct legal boxes to allow us to go forward with our potential development, either at St. James's Park or for a new stadium, and to facilitate that with financing. So the initial reaction to this, and it probably is relatively true, is that this is a PSR compliance move. But to Crisho's point and to Mr. Capper's point, this will also enable us to spend money that on the stadium in whatever context that is, and that won't be in any way impacting our PSR or our SCR, any of those things, which is an interesting one because it sounds like we can spend whatever we want on it, not count that in terms of spending, but whatever we make then from it in terms of match day and commercial revenue, that does count. There's so many loopholes. You'd want to be a very good accountant to be working.
But also UEFA are not gonna be happy with this. The fact that we just made £130 million off the sale of our stadium. Now I know that they shored up the rules after Chelsea made a mockery of them. Like, well,
it's funny. It's funny they did and they didn't, because there was a vote. Now again, there might have been movement since, but when I looked this up this morning, it did look like there was a vote in June last year that Premier League clubs, although they went for the new SCR thing, they had voted against kind of that whole idea of like being able to sell assets in that same way. Now, unless it's changed since. So it's all very messy, to say the least. But where I'd be confident here is that this is the first time we've seen Newcastle actually go, do you know what? Fuck this.
Yeah.
We need to start playing the game rather than what we were doing before, which was being seen to be very, very compliant and not doing anything that could cause any scrutiny or microscopes on our books and on us as a club. And that probably coincides with the change from PSR to the squad cost ratio, the 3-year rolling situation, all those things probably changing. But just to, I suppose, to take it from the top, the accounts were announced, as we said, for the 24-25 season. What's important here is, is what this represents, what period this represents. That actually reflects the season where we weren't in the Champions League.
Yeah.
And they have announced a 44% increase in commercial revenue. I think we've ended up with a 34
yes, they have.
million.
Yes, they have.
Yes, they have. Crisho has spent about £1 million of that, and Alan another £2 million, and me £85 last time I was over. But it does appear that we have made a 34 million profit overall on paper. There's a 40% increase in revenue. These are record numbers for Newcastle United based on a season that we didn't have that European campaign. And the Carabao Cup final will come into it because it's a few extra games of match day revenue and there's a small bit of prize money, but overall I don't think it represents a lot.
I think it was 75,000 for winning the
really minimal. I think you get about £1.5 million in total if you go on that run. you play all those extra games, you win the trophy and everything that comes with it. But like, that's really small on the grand scheme of things. My take on this is that the Adidas deal is where a lot of this increase was, in terms of launching the partnership and then selling the new kit and all the new gear and all the new merch that comes with that. Commercial revenue is up from match days, which is a mix of, like, obviously a lot more games, ticket sales, obviously like things they sell around the stadium, but apparently the stack also come into it as well, in terms of the income that generates, because that's part of the club and the money that we
that
spend
must
there.
be making a lot of money.
Paul. Well, I've spent way more money in the stack than I've spent in the club shop, Chris. I can tell you that much.
You sure have.
But I'm putting Johnny Stack's kids through college at this point.
It's a real asset. It's a real asset for them. It's a real asset for them to have.
Yeah, and it definitely works. So yeah, I think this is the first kind of, let's say, first major, on paper, shrewd moves in terms of trying to navigate the rules. Whether or not it matters for PSR has been popping up, because my original understanding of our PSR situation, which is going to evolve into SCR, but if we were still under the PSR kind of situation and the rolling 3 years of looking back over your books, the Alexander Isak money, that huge profit, probably would have sorted us out for PSR either way this summer. And I'll only talk about this summer. There's no point talking any further ahead. Yeah. So I think that sale alone probably put us in good situation from a PSR perspective. And this has definitely reaffirmed it as far as I'm concerned. Does that mean we need to sell players? We probably don't need to sell players this summer as much as we would have if the usual PSR rules applied, or had the Alexander Isak thing not taken place. I do feel we're in a different situation with player sales in terms of player-driven sales and players that want to leave. But we might talk about that, Chris, towards the end of the episode. Where this gets interesting for me, in terms of the commercial revenue, this word commercial revenue. Yeah. So for anyone who hasn't read into it, we're moving from PSR to SCR, which is the squad cost ratio. And just to put it really simply, and this is just my kind of how I process it in my mind, you can spend up to 85% of your revenue on your squad cost, which is largely your transfers and your wages and your agent fees and contracts and all that.
Yeah.
So basically, does it even the playing field? For me, no. Right. And Chris, you're going to talk about Man City as an example in a minute. So this change to SCR doesn't really mean that we can catch up any quicker, because if we make 200 million in revenue, Man City make 800 million, they can spend 85% of 800 and we can spend 85% of 200. Well, so when you really boil it down to those brass taxes, it doesn't level the playing field. But what will be interesting is how much we can spend, or how much more we can spend, because we're earning more. But we'll come back to that. Chris.
Just really quickly, it's just something that was not really presented as an overall, or sorry, an outline of kind of the report. But if you just looked into it a little bit more, wages actually went up 95 million over that financial year, which is again something that in this kind of squad cost ratio, if wages are factored into it, we need to understand that if we are going to sign bigger and better players, wages are going to start to become a grave concern. We have a structure. I know we do. I know we have a structure there, and even top quality players like Bruno and people like that could go to Manchester United or Real Madrid and get like double their wages, but they're not like that. Thankfully, they'll stay with us. But it's a grave concern for me, because we're kind of we're crawling out of this hole here to try and get somewhere near these guys.
We're digging our way out of a hole.
Yeah, digging our way out of it.
At times it feels like it's a JCB shoveling shit down on top of us, and we've got a teaspoon rather than like a dumper. But the more we earn,
the more we earn, the more we're going to have to pay. The more the fans are going to have to pay. The more shirts and jerseys and stuff that you're going to have to buy. You saw already the seat prices have gone up by what, 5%, isn't it, next year?
Yeah.
And that's not much. I think they're trying to. And that Hopkinson fella, he really was talking about international fans a lot. He mentioned it 6 times in his interview. Okay, he did throw in after the fact, local fans, of course, local this, local that, local this. But he was talking about international fans, just like Arsenal, Man City, Man Red, all them, Chelsea. They have at least 30 to 40% of their seats, their merchandise, and their commercial revenue coming from international locations, and Newcastle need to wake up. Yes, it's a very local club, but look at, if we want to be a big boy, we've got to spread out and be an international brand, like we've discussed on the podcast before. So these accounts, like you said, Paul, turnover up 5%, commercial up 44%, a profit of 129 million. And just on that, and something I mentioned in the group today, is that our commercial revenue was 335.3 million pounds. That is less than, or sorry, our turnover, excuse me, our turnover was 335 million. That is less than Man City's commercial revenue last year. So that's overall turnover, and then Man City's commercial revenue was more than our overall turnover. That shows the actual gap there is. Liverpool made 700 million, so that's double what we got. Man City made like 829 million with a commercial revenue of 355 million pounds. I mean, wow, basically, it's no wonder they can buy 3 players in January and throw 150 million at it. So 2030, that's 4 years away. By God, we're going to have to do some fair financial tricks and Harry Redknapp-esque trades. But it's I think maybe Mr. Hopkinson should maybe push that out to 2035, possibly. Maybe another 5 years on top of that.
It's a gap that may never close, realistically, at least in terms of finances, right? And this is where it comes back to then. How do you be more competitive and bring yourself to their level if you can't compete with them financially? That means you can't go for the same players. Therefore, you got to be smart in terms of recruitment. But ultimately, I think we have to do what we've been doing largely, which has been punching above our weight, this season excluded, because we've been very disappointing this season and overall performing below expectations. I don't think anyone can argue we aren't performing below expectations with the squad we have, having been in the Champions League. Granted, it's been an awful tough season. We've played more games than any other club in the top 5 leagues, but we need to continue probably performing above expectations through our style of play, through smart recruitment, through getting crazy amounts of levels of football out of players who, you wouldn't think that was possible in a previous life. And the way I'm looking at it, where we've come so far to date, 4 years, 2 Champions League qualifications and a Carabao Cup win, as well as top 7 finishes and all that kind of thing. Looking at our commercial revenue now, thinking about SCR and the fact that we can spend, as we said, 85% of that revenue, regardless of the fact that all of their revenue is up and always will be, ours is up, which means we should have more money to spend. And that's in addition to money we make through previous player sales, as we mentioned, the British record sale that took place, and any other players we sell, which we'll come to. Just before we continue, talking of internationals, Sandro Tonali's Italy went down to 10 men early, and they're 1-1 against Bosnia and Herzegovina in their World Cup qualifier. Italy, as you know, have missed the last 2 World Cups, I think. So it would be a big shock for Italy to miss that again, but they are down to 10 men. The Czechs and Denmark are about to go into extra time, and Sweden have won 3-2. They're going to the World Cup, which means Anthony Elanga is going to the World Cup. Fair play to him.
And Emil
in other news, Ireland drew 0-0 with North Macedonia, but positively, England lost at home to Japan 1-0. So there we are.
The Brighton guy, is it?
Brighton guy scored, yeah. Anthony Gordon started for England in that game. I know Hall and Livramento were on the bench. Both of them came on in the 59th minute. Dan Burn came on in the 83rd minute. So disappointing for England, and I'm sure they'll all be in uproar thinking, oh yeah, here we go, another shitty World Cup. But hey, at least you're there. We are not. That is all I want to say about that.
Right. Good. Well, look, there was another thing that we did come out today, and it came from obviously sound bites from the interviews, just about and because it's been on everyone's lips since the Sunderland game, and a little bit before that too, about Eddie Howe's future, and that he had mentioned that they weren't happy, that the results have hurt. The last week has been a literal disaster, essentially, for Newcastle as a club and their fan base, and Eddie Howe is rightly under pressure. I know they had a long conversation, which I was assuming that they were going to, and he wasn't. This is the new CEO. He wasn't committal really in his answer about Eddie Howe's future. He didn't want to discuss it, but he just wanted the fans to know that, look, key decisions have to be made. I do believe, and this is my personal opinion, that he will be given one more season. Football is a business, and it's a bloody ruthless business, and there's no time for sentimentality with this. Eddie Howe won us a trophy. He's performed above expectations. He's played with a squad which was a risk from last summer all the way through, not buying somebody in January. We are in the Premier League where we deserve to be because we haven't played well in the league. It's a horrible thing to admit, but it's the truth. But I found it very interesting that he was so non-committal, that there still was an air there that, look, he's really expecting, and this is again the CEO saying that he's really expecting Newcastle to perform very well over the next 7 games. And to be frank with you, Paul, I'd be kind of concerned for Eddie Howe if we didn't. Say we lost 5 of the next 7 games, right? And we're 15th, right? God forbid, right? I've got an awful suspicion that, like, with how ruthless these guys are, that, look, and Eddie Howe himself might even admit it. Look, I've run out of steam. I'm cooked. I need a break. It's been like, because we all know, I mean, being a manager of Newcastle United, talk about a goldfish bowl. I'm sure he's suffocated sometimes, with the amount of work he has to do and the pressure of being in that goldfish bowl and managing such an intense football club. I'd be very concerned, Paul, that if we didn't perform well over the next 7 games, that they might make a decision before they start spending money. I can't see it. I do think they'll give him another year to prove himself. He's built up that credit.
Yeah. I'll tell you where my head is at with this. I remember, I did say it a while back when we were kind of speculating about the year. Yeah. I did not think that Thomas Tuchel would stay on at England. I thought he was just going to do that World Cup no matter what happened. And I always had a suspicion that Eddie Howe then would be lured away from Newcastle by the England job. I still think he might go in the summer. Either way.
Oh, right.
And what I mean by that is
have a break and then take the England job after the fact.
No, I forget about the England job. I think that's gone now because of Thomas Tuchel. He's done relatively well there, but I still expect. I put it this way: I wouldn't be surprised at all if Eddie Howe left Newcastle in the summer, and the means by which that happens are the question. If, as you just pointed out, that the end of the season doesn't go well, so we've got 7 games left in the league, so we're back to 1 game a week football by and large. 4 of those games are away from home. We've got Palace, Arsenal, Forest, and Fulham all away from home. And then we've got Bournemouth, Brighton, and West Ham at home. Now, bar the Arsenal game, they're all quite winnable, right?
Yeah, agreed.
So if you're looking at saying, Arsenal are going for a Premier League title, you'd expect them to beat us in the Emirates because they've so much more to play for and they've been the best team all season. Then you're looking at 6 games. You'd expect he has to win all 3 at home. Bournemouth, Brighton, and West Ham. He has to win all them at home. And then from the other 3, I think you should be looking to get at least 2 wins. If he doesn't get anywhere close to that, right? So to your point, right? If we get a couple of wins and scraping a couple of draws and we finish 14th in the league, well, I probably would say he should be sacked. That is a massive underperformance. Granted, mitigating circumstances, so many games, but we did spend a lot of money, right? Yes, it wasn't wisely spent, but we did spend it. Players were brought in. On paper, at least, he was supported by the board. Granted, the Ezek situation was a shit show and all that. And I'm only talking about last summer. Was he supported in the previous 4 windows? No. Did he lose not key players, but like Anderson would be in our squad and Minta would be in our squad for sure. And they would be doing wonderful things for Newcastle. Yeah. But on paper, he was supported financially. Loads of time. He's been there a long time. We were in the Champions League. It wasn't a terrible season by Cup's perspective. But if we were to, as I said, finish 14th, kind of piss our way through the end of the season slightly miserably, very inconsistently at least, come out of it bottom half, anything below 12th, then I wouldn't kind of be critical of the ownership or the executive of the board if they sacked him, because we finished 14th in the league. We finished 5th last year.
So you're taking all of the other seasons out of it and the credit he's built up. You think that credit would have been spent by now?
You just said it yourself. There's no room for sentimentality. We're already, even though we've had this takeover and we've moved away from the Ashley era. We're again in this period of transition. There is a massive rebuild of this squad going to happen. Like it has to happen. And there'll be a decision of, right. And I'm only talking about, if things don't really go well this season. I'll come back to Eddie Howe himself in a minute. But if ultimately we finish really poorly, then the questions have to be there. Does he have the backing of the team? Does he still have the fresh ideas? And is he the man to take us forward through that rebuild? Now, on Eddie Howe's point of view, where you're talking about the credit in the bank and where you're talking about, look at all he's done and look how many times he's proven everyone wrong and look at what he's gotten out of certain players, the Almiron, Fabian Scher, Longstaff, Jacob Murphy. If Eddie Howe deep down is 120% sure that he has the same appetite, he has the same vision, and not the same, but like as in he's fully like, I absolutely want to be here nowhere else. I know exactly what I want to do. I have the same energy levels. And bear in mind, as far as we know, this is a guy who gets up at 5 a.m. and comes home at 8 p.m. most nights, maybe not all the time, but it's a 24/7 job quite often. He has family. He was sick. If he was to say none of that matters, I am as eager to do this and I have all these, and presents the case as much as he did when he interviewed and obviously impressed everyone in the room, that's when the board should be, okay, do we trust this guy? And knowing who he is and having worked with him. And that's where it becomes more on Eddie Howe's decision of he deserves to present his case. And if he presents a strong enough one, then I would say, okay, fine. Let's give him that chance because he's earned that.
I think
but
that's
I wouldn't
what he
give
did.
It to him blindly.
No, I think that's what he did today at the lunch that he had with the new CEO. I think they probably talked about it, and I think he probably asked him, like, where are you at? Because let's be frank here, if there is a rebuild coming, right? It's clear to everybody that there's a rebuild coming. Older players have to leave, newer players have to come in. And it's something that happened at Spurs that has caused this snowball for Spurs probably nearly getting relegated, is that you bring a manager in and he could get to the summer for a rebuild, allowing them to buy 6-7 players or whatever. You need to stick with that manager to allow them to get the best of the players that they've picked to bring into the club. They're not going to hand over the checkbook to Eddie Howe if they have a feeling that they're not going to keep him around.
And that's where I would expect. I don't know Eddie Howe. He doesn't know me. I don't know him.
Mm-hmm.
But if Eddie Howe has anything in his mind, this is my opinion on it. If Eddie Howe is thinking, managing the last 4 years at Newcastle, I would argue has been more grueling than managing in nearly any other team over a 4-year period. As you can see, a lot of managers don't survive that long. Ruben Amorim is an example. All of the Spurs managers are examples.
Yeah.
But I would argue Eddie Howe has probably had the most grueling 4 years in a row the last 4 years than any other manager. Arteta, Guardiola. Guardiola isn't winning the league, like you said, in January. He just goes and buys whoever's in form. Last year it was Marmoush. This year it was Semenyo. Okay. So, I just think Eddie Howe's last 4 years has probably been more grueling than anyone else with everything that's gone on at the club. You mentioned that metaphor of having to dig our way out. We've had to dig our way through everything. Nobody's given us nothing. Everything has been a battle. Everything has been a fight. It's been hard work. It's been graft. It's been scrutiny. And that's from our own fan base, but that's from everyone else talking about the club and the ownership. I wouldn't blame the guy at all if he just went, you know what, lads, I need a break. He did it before, after the Bournemouth slog, and it became a slog in the end, and he did miracle work to bring them all the way up from the dregs of Division 2 or 3 or whatever it was called at the time, up to the Premier League. And then he was heavily criticized because they got relegated. It was a fucking miracle they were there with the facilities and the resources they had. And ultimately, he went on a break and he took nearly 2 years off, and he went, he did some time with his family. He was over at Simeone at Atletico Madrid. He was in Denmark, and he was basically retraining himself. It feels like I suspect he needs something like that again before, going into another big project, even if that project is our project. And I can't help but think the guy must be wrecked. And that's where, again, if I'm Eddie Howe, or if Eddie Howe has that on his mind in any shape or form, then I think he owes it to himself and to everyone else to say, well, do you know what, let's let someone else have a crack at this. because he's done phenomenally well. Even if the end of this season doesn't go well, he'll still be always held in high regard. And then pressure falls back on the club and the owners and the executive board, the new sporting director, and then it's right transition. Sure, new manager, and it can go wrong, but it could have gone wrong with Eddie Howe and it didn't. So at some point Eddie Howe will leave, whether it's now or in 2 years' time. That is going to happen. Those same risks will apply. So why not do it now? Again, if Eddie Howe, himself needs that break, and if the club aren't convinced that he actually does want to continue. And just the last thing, sorry, I've talked a lot here. I've got so much on my mind, Chris. I've been sitting in this house all day working. I'm just thinking about it every time I wasn't.
I'm here, Paul. I'm here.
With what Hopkinson said, like nothing about what Hopkinson said surprised me at all. Like to me, almost any chairman could say that about any manager in the league. Right. What's the story with the manager? Well, we'll see what happens in the summer. Why? Because he doesn't know where Eddie Howe is at. Eddie Howe will have the chance to say how he's doing. The club have to make those decisions. They're not going to say, oh yeah, we're backing him for the next 3 years. Now, why would they? Because he could turn around in the summer himself and say, I need a break. Or developments could happen in the board to say, we're going in a different direction. They're still in, obviously, a phase of this season, as well as, looking back on finances and looking ahead on developments. So I'm not surprised. What he said for me doesn't suggest, oh yeah, there's doubts over Eddie Howe. I think those doubts would be there even if he said, oh yeah, we're fully committed to him. If you just said that, the same things could happen in the summer. It doesn't make any difference to me.
If you were a trader or an investor in a big enough company, a big enough company, right? And you dashed £124 million, and essentially that £124 million in the space of 6 months ended up actually kind of working out to be more like £50 million. So you'd lost.
Are you talking about Wissa and Alanga?
I'm talking about Wissa and Baltimore, that had lost value, right? You'd be fired. You'd be fired, and you wouldn't be trusted with any portfolio for any trading whatsoever. Eddie Howe, like I've stuck up for him, was left in a terrible situation last summer. He needed to get reinforcements in. He was completely left in charge of the football club by all accounts, in every sense, like as if everyone just shut the door on June the 1st and left him there, even though he should have been on holiday. He was doing everything. This, I really believe that this cost him nearly his job. And nearly his own sanity as well, in terms of, I'd rather see him walk away than be fired. But
100%.
Wissa, the rumours going around about Wissa going, I'm sure it's nonsense, but Turkish teams looking at a loan to buy for him, and Voltamade performing again an 8 out of 10 for Germany during last week, played a cracking match, and yet we can't fit him. We're playing him in midfield, expecting him to turn into Joelinton. There's something halftime at Barcelona, halftime at the Sunderland game, something somewhere along the line here. There's a couple of players that have lost faith in Eddie Howe, or they've lost faith in the overall project. And not only should we be replacing some of the old boys this summer, we should be getting rid of these river rats out of the club. Whoever's not fully behind playing for Newcastle, wanting to be a Newcastle United player, and wanting to put their heart and soul into it, Gordon and Tonali, they can get to F, both of them. And I think that Hopkinson, like he said, the exact situation will never happen again. We'll only sell and trade players out of here that benefit the football club, which is what you want someone to say at that, in that position. But I do firmly believe that Newcastle United fans should get ready for quite the transitional summer. I do believe Gordon and I do believe Tonali will be sold. I do believe Livramento will be sold also. And I do believe that with the money we have from not buying anybody in January and some of the commercial revenue and revenue that we have, I believe that we will be bringing in 7 to 8 players based off Ross Wilson's list with Eddie. And they'll be, interesting players, because they won't just be Premier League experienced players that we're buying from Brentford or whoever. They're going to be from France, Germany, Spain, Portugal, bring them in, and a new revolution, and go, Eddie, okay, there you go. These players are hungry. Look at Sunderland. These guys all came in. You don't tell me that 11 to 12 of those Sunderland players thought to themselves, if I sign for Sunderland and I play well, I'm going to be on Sky Sports and TNT Sports every week doing well. Someone's not going to come in and want to sign me. And their agents are like, yeah, you can sign for Man Red, or you could sign for Liverpool, or you could sign for Arsenal or something. Look at Brimo Buemo. He did it. He went to Man Red, and he's getting like £300,000 a week. All of those guys that play for Sunderland, they're playing out of their skin to leave the club so they can sign for somebody better. That's not the Newcastle way. That's not what we are. We're not a stepping stone up to the top six. We want players in that are. Well, look.
Let's be realistic. We may not have a choice in this because, sorry, not to just adopt that as your model, obviously.
No.
But you're already talking there. Now, the reasons by which players might leave is different for the likes of Tino and Tonali and Gordon, and I'll come back to that maybe. Most clubs don't set out to go, yeah, we'll like some clubs like Bournemouth, for example, they know that they'll lose players again, and they have, and those players have gone on to PSG and gone on to Real Madrid and gone on to Man City, right? You're talking about Zabarny, you're talking about Huijsen, obviously Semenyo, but it's the identification of those players that matters. So we could have signed all three of those players. Bournemouth might have signed them thinking, yeah, well, in a couple of years, they'll probably be worth a lot of money. We should be signing them thinking these could be our best players.
They could
we can still shop for the same players, but the approach doesn't have to be, and then we'll sell them in 3 years. You might sell them in 3 years, especially if the money is there, but it's about signing potential, and it's about talent identification. Yeah. I was chatting to Tev earlier on the phone. We were just having random chats, and I just started going down the rabbit hole of like, when is the last time we kind of just went signing relative unknown players that, kind of, I don't want to say come out of nowhere, but like not being big players being talked about. Last summer, I was thinking it was Maxi as a real good example. Alan St. Maximin. Nobody really else, not that he was elite or anything like that, but it's not like loads of clubs were wanting to sign him at the time. Whereas last summer we went for players that everybody else wanted: João Pedro, Liam Delap, Benjamin Sesko, Brian Mbuemo, you name it, right? We were going for players that everyone else wanted. Whereas Bournemouth, as an example, are snapping up players at the right time that not everyone is queuing up for. And we have to be willing to take those risks, as far as I'm concerned. Just to go back then on, it's kind of like the blame game. Eddie Howe's under pressure because these signings haven't worked out. The biggest question for me is, how did we end up in that situation? And then you're trying to figure out, right, like Hopkinson's only just landed in. So he's kind of like, if I'm Hopkinson, I'm like, in my strongest Canadian accent, hey guys, what the fuck's been going on here for the last 18 months? Because it looks like a shit show. Because it does look like a shit show. There's, the questions for me roll all the way up to Jamie Rubin and Yasser and the guys who've been there all along for the last 3-4 years, whatever it is, because they tried to bring in Dan Ashworth. That was a complete waste of time and energy. They tried to bring in Paul Mitchell, a complete waste of time and energy. Peter Silverstone also left. Like this board has been a mess.
It's a mess.
And we've ended up in this situation where everyone's saying, oh, it's Eddie Howe's fault that these transfers are shite. But who's to blame for the situation that A, we got so late in the window that we had to panic? B, Eddie Howe is the one seemingly making the decisions with Andy Howe and Steve Nixon or whoever.
Yeah.
I don't feel like anyone in the board can kind of go, this is all your fault, Eddie. If I'm Eddie Howe, I'm going, well, like, why the fuck am I in charge of transfers, lads? Where are all of your, what are all the decisions you've made? The transfers that the owners have made, i.e. bringing in certain directors and executives, they've been equally poor because they all came in and then fucked off again and didn't have any impact whatsoever.
And cost the club money in compensation and all sorts
absolutely,
of
right? So there's a lot of blame to be spread not towards Eddie Howe. Now, where the blame goes to Eddie Howe is, right, well, your job is, obviously he was involved in identifying players. So like, I think Voltemade, I don't think Voltemade was a bad signing, because Voltemade, I'd seen him play, highly, highly rated. Bayern were looking at Voltemade as the long-term replacement for Kane. This guy's playing up front for Germany, smashed it at the Euros. Loads of clubs were looking at this guy. we had an opportunity. We had to overpay because everyone knew we had a bunch of extra cash. But I still think that was a signing I would have taken at any point in the last year. We just paid a little bit too much. At the time, I think Elanga looked like a perfectly good signing. 50 million is 50 million. It's Premier League tax, but there was, the evidence would suggest that Elanga shouldn't have been a bad signing. And I think if Isak stayed, he would have been a fantastic signing. And similarly at Ramsey, Wissa is a ridiculous one. And yes,
that's the worst one. That's the worst one, I think.
It is terrible, and it was so late. We end up overpaying because we had to do it so late. It was such a panic buy. But I still reckon Eddie Howe probably wanted Wissa for the last 2 years. So that's where you could put a little bit of blame on his identification of players and whatever. But ultimately, it still rolls back up to how did we get in this situation? And that's because we didn't have people in place to take ownership of it. So our manager ends up being dragged into it. Obviously, he consults on players anyway, but whoever's negotiating the fees and all that, which Amanda used to do, which probably Murdad was involved in when they were signing Anthony Gordon and Bruno Guimaraes, Alessandro Tonali, like that's all fallen apart in the last 18 months. So I just find it hard to pin the blame on Eddie Howe for all the transfer business and the fees that are paid. That's not him.
Yeah.
But you did make one other point, which I do think Eddie Howe should be blamed for, and that's why the fuck is he trying to play Voltemade as a number 8? It's insane. But that's for another day. But like, that's not the reason. If Eddie Howe gets sacked, or if it's not just going to be all down to this Voltemade situation. But we have grossly underperformed in many areas. We're going to take a quick break.
Right.
We're going to take a quick break because I'm like, I've got more words than sense coming out of my mouth at this stage. So let's take a quick break to compose ourselves. And we'll just do a little bit of speculation on what's going to happen in the summer, knowing what we now know about revenue, money, etc., and what we do think will happen from an outgoing perspective, more so than incoming, because it's too soon. We'll be right back. A huge thank you to our podcast sponsors of the Irish Mag Show. The Half Volley, providers of high-quality, customizable clothing and merchandise, catering for all sports teams, businesses, social clubs and events. FSH Training Limited, a team of expert frontline paramedics and firefighters delivering first aid, fire safety, manual handling and patient handling for all business environments. And JH Fitness, an Irish-based online coaching business specialising in sustainable fat loss, lifestyle change and long-term health for real-world men and women. Support local. Check out all of our partner sponsor links in the podcast description. Welcome back to the Irish Mag Show. Krisho. We've just spent the last 30 or 40 minutes talking about accounts, talking about revenues, talking about profits and stadiums and structure and manager and all that kind of stuff, especially the Eddie Howe situation. But where I think it would be good to think about where all this rolls us towards, it's very hard not to just think about the summer, and it's too soon to even think about incomings. As we've said, you think we need 7 players. I think we need probably double that. Depending on
but come on, but come on, like, we've already got one 16-year-old from Ecuador called Johan Martinez, who supposedly half the world was after. Let's hope he's let's
hope he's not playing for Brighton in 2 years' time.
Scores against us or something. But
what I want to ask you is, particularly, and just on that point, Sunderland last year they brought in about 18 players. Our sporting director that we've just hired, Ross Wilson, oversaw a Nottingham Forest team that probably bought 50 players over the space of 2 seasons. So, like, it's not out of the question. It's not something you want to do, but we may be in a situation where we actually need to do this. But I wanted to ask you about potential outgoing transfers, because I don't think our outgoings would be driven by a need to comply with PSR anymore or a need to generate large amounts of cash.
No, I don't think so.
I do fear that it's either going to be one, players demanding to leave. You mentioned the Isak situation might not happen again. I wouldn't completely rule that out.
No, it won't. It won't be allowed to happen again. It won't be allowed to happen again, Paul.
We'll talk about Tonali in a minute. So one scenario is we get certain players that actually want to leave, and that's because of potential interest, or they just want to get out of the club or get out of the city or get out of whatever. Or 2, we start to receive some offers that we can't refuse, and this kind of goes hand in hand. You mentioned 3 names in particular. You mentioned Tonali, you mentioned Gordon, and you mentioned Tino Livramento.
Yeah.
If you're expecting all 3 of those to leave, which of those do you think will be the player driving the transfer, as in transfer request or asking to leave, or which do you think it would be? Big clubs coming in and us receiving an offer that we kind of have to accept for what it's worth?
I think Gordon wanting to leave won't hopefully get reported because he doesn't want to be run out of another football club. But I don't see him wanting to play for us if we come 12th or 11th in the Premier League and have no European football. He thinks a lot of himself, this chap. So I can't see him sticking. He owes us nothing. None of these three players owe us anything. Some people would say, "Oh, Hank Bishop Tonali owes us another season." No, he doesn't. This is football. It's ruthless. And he wants trophies. Look at Kane. Kane was Mr. Tottenham. He wasn't going to win any trophies there. He knew it. So he went to Bayern Munich, where he absolutely guaranteed himself having some form of trophy cabinet in his house. That's not to say that that's where I'm coming at with this, but I believe Manchester City will come in for Tino. There will be two players coming trading for Tino, plus a little bit of money, 22, 23 million pounds, plus two players. One of them is probably going to be the goalkeeper. What's his name? God damn it. I've tried to forget his name. Trafford. And then another kind of a younger squad player at left back or right back that plays at City, which is going to fit in very nicely. Boom, deal done. Thanks very much. Yeah, get it done before the World Cup. Tonali will be going back to Italy, but then people say, well, nobody in Italy could afford him. Again, I also believe the Tonali will not be a cash sale. I believe it will be a player trade deal with a nominal amount of money, say 40 million pounds plus another two players. This is what I think that is written on their notepads at board level. We have assets here that we can get 2 to 3 players for this one asset plus a little bit of money. Let's go and do that with these clubs. And a lot of clubs would bite your hand off for that kind of a deal, to offload, wages and players that aren't going to be playing for somebody that's going to go straight into your first team. They'll bite your bloody hand off. I think with listening to the guy today, the Hopkinson guy today, it's very much like the NHL, which he was actively involved in before with the New York Rangers. Trades go on all the time. Big players get sold in ice hockey, traded with their contracts get traded, and 3 or 4 players come in for one player. That's the kind of business model I think that they're kind of looking at. And I believe that Tonali, Gordon, and Tino will be sold for nominal amounts of money, but 6 players to 7 players will come in off those 3 deals. And players that will, very good players, and players that will fit in with Eddie Howe, and Eddie Howe wants. So they'll go to Man City, they'll go to somewhere in Italy with Tonali, and with Gordon, it might be Liverpool, possibly, or it might be somebody in Europe that might come in, but they'll go and say, look, we'll give you Gordon, but we want this chap, that chap, and this chap, plus we want about 10 million euros just to shore it up. No worries, boom, done. And that's going to happen. We're going to get 6 to 7 players for selling those 3 guys. But I don't see anybody else going out apart from Kraft, Trippier, Ramsdale.
I forgot about poor old Crafu.
Yeah, but my point here, and my point for the Irish Mags and everybody listening, is that get used to. I'm sure you might have played it on your Mega Drive when you were younger, NHL 94, but get used to this whole trading deal thing going on, because the Americanization of how sports teams do business is slowly seeping its way into the English business model. And this is very much the only way Newcastle, because that's the way the smaller teams in America in basketball, baseball, and hockey come up, is that they trade their big player for 3 or 4 very good players.
The only thing I'll say is, now again, this is PSR is changing, but that whole, it used to be known as like a player exchange. So like in your scenario, okay, we'll give you 30 million plus James Trafford plus another. As far as I believe, I think those days are gone in terms of that on paper. So example, we sold Elliot Anderson to Nottingham Forest for 35 million, which was for a player who'd only played really a handful of Premier League games for Newcastle. And it was a lot of money, I think. Now, in hindsight, it isn't. But at the time, I actually do think it was a very good price for Elliot Anderson. Now it's not, obviously. And we bought Vlachodimos for 20. Rather than saying, hey, guys, give us 15 plus Vlachodimos.
Yeah, but that was
Do
getting
you know what I
around.
mean?
That was getting around financial rules. That was for the PSO reason.
But I think clubs are just going to continue operating that model. So I think the difference would be, let's say exactly what you say is going to happen. I think it would be more a case of them saying, we want 60 million for Tino Livramento,
and
we will give you 25 million for James Trafford. So I know I think it's trading, but it's not on paper trade. You know what I mean? It's more about what shows where. And I think that's just because of bookkeeping and because of how it all looks. Money is more, it's like going for a mortgage, you know. Your equity or your bonus is no good for a mortgage. It's just about the hard cash you earn. I think that the trading concept can still happen verbally in the room as part of the dealing, but on paper it's going to be this guy goes there for this amount and this guy goes for
no.
it can still be leveraged. It can still be leveraged, and I get your point. I think the names you've mentioned, I mean, it is concerning to the extent
it is.
how good those players are.
I'm not happy saying it. I'm not happy saying it.
No, not at all. I have a little inkling of a Tonali to Arsenal if Arsenal win the league, because I think that you're right. I don't think many Italian clubs could afford him, unless a Real Madrid or someone came in. But I feel like Mikel Arteta, as a former midfielder, when you look at their midfield currently, Odegaard hasn't been himself at all. Obviously, Rice is Rice, and then he's got Zubimendi, who's really good. I think Mikel Merino is probably on the fringe there, another ex-Newcastle player. I think Mikel Arteta would give his left foot to have Tonali in at Arsenal, and they'll have the money to do it. And I think that it would be London more so than, let's say, Manchester that would lure him, and in particular his other half, who might be rumored to want to get out of Dodge in Newcastle. That's just a suspicion I have, but look, I could be completely off track. Gordon to Liverpool makes sense.
Yeah, look at Miley, Mikel Merino, and Elliot Anderson will be the future midfield for Newcastle United.
I know Mikel Merino will go back to Spain. I think he's had enough.
I don't know. I mean, he might come. He might come and join us and become.
You never know. You never know. It didn't work out the first time too well, but anyway, Gordon to Liverpool I think makes sense. And yeah, I know that Guardiola has been mad for Tino for some time as well. The only other one, if I was putting my tinfoil hat on, or at least, you know, this is all obviously we're just kind of like hypothesizing here.
Yeah, speculating.
I'd be keeping an eye on Bruno at this point. I just think the guy is probably reaching an age where he has a decision to make as to what he wants from his career or what he wants to have achieved in his career by the time he retires. And he's probably reaching a point where it would be the last opportunity to get a very big move. And I think Pep would love to have someone like him at Man City, because Rodri hasn't been great. I think Liverpool would bite the hand off for him because their midfield's been a bit erratic. These are clubs with money. And even looking at Real Madrid's midfield, it's still very young. You've got Camavinga and you've got Tchouaméni. Valverde is outstanding, but still quite young. I think they would have room for him in there. And, you know, he would fit into that kind of Modric role very quickly, I would suspect as well. But again, it would be down to Bruno, I think. But it's just something I would keep an eye on. Similar to Eddie Howe, if Bruno kind of turned around and said, look, I can't turn this down. You know, this is an opportunity to go to one of those really, really, really big clubs. I mean, if it was Real Madrid, I'd be like, yeah, fair enough, Bruno. Do you know?
Yeah,
Gavin Harris and Santiago Nunez went there in the Goal movie. So I think, you know, Bruno would be hard not to. It's just something I'll be keeping an eye on. The stage he's at his career, the age he's at in his career. He's been brilliant this season before he got injured. If the opportunity presented himself, he'd have to look in the mirror an awful lot and think, you know, will I get this opportunity again? And you couldn't blame him, especially if it was someone like Real Madrid or even Barcelona. That's a terrible note to finish on.
Wow.
To turn it around positively, though, I think we're going to have a lot of money to spend. We may not be in the market for the same.
How much, Paul? How much, Paul? You say a lot of money, right? I'm thinking 250 million pounds again. That's pretty much what we have.
I think we would easily have that if those players all left. I think you'd be looking at the bones of between 150 and 200 million coming in for those three players, like Tonali and Gordon and Tino. Like, you're talking probably something like, I don't know, 70, 60, 50, you know, like all together. So that's 180, even if it was 70, 60 and 50, you know. So it's the bones of it. in addition to money we already have, money we've earned, money you can spend. And then there may be a few other players that would leave too. We talked about players in the fringe, and you're looking at Joe Willock. I don't
Who
know.
do you think's actually going to leave? I think Trippier's going to leave. I think Kraft's away. I think Shard's finished up.
Those players might be finished up. Yeah, of course. And Nick Pope could be gone. We've talked about Willock obviously already.
Ramsdale's going back, isn't he? We're not signing Ramsdale.
Ramsdale is going back. We're not saying Ramsdale, no.
Right,
so Ramsdale will be going back. So there's going to be a big churn, and I think with that would be a lot of money to spend. And like we said, that's going to require Ross Wilson to do a hell of a job as sporting director to oversee all those transfers and negotiations. That's going to take a lot of proper recruitment, bringing in the right signings, and doing it fucking early. Because if we sit around on our hands and wait till the World Cup finishes and go, look at that guy for Turkey, or look at that guy for Switzerland, or look at that guy for whoever who has a storming World Cup, well, then everyone else is going to be after them. So I would like us to be moving.
That was today. That was today, Paul. Hopkinson guy did say that today, that they want to get their business done early. Now, we've heard that before. They've tried to get their business done early, but it just hasn't worked out. But I do think, I firmly believe that there will be like 2 to 3 players signed before the start of the World Cup. Now, not massive wow signings, but players, like squad players that have the potential to be a first teamer, will be brought in before the World Cup, that we have to go, okay.
Well, put it this way, unless they're really planning manager moves, there's no reason not to start trying to make those signings and get them over the line and not have to wait till the World Cup. As it stands, before we wrap up, the Czechs are 2-2 in extra time against Denmark. Penalties in progress. Italy are 2 minutes away from going into extra time, so we're looking at Sandro Tonali may or may not be at the World Cup. There's a lot going on. Be interesting to see if Denmark get there. They might take Willisula with them, but who knows? Chris Show, I think that's as good a time as any to bring an end to episode 120. Alan and all the listeners, we hope we haven't depressed you too much with the talks of all these outgoings, but I think no matter what way you look at this, changes are afoot, transition is happening. It's going to be a wild summer. We've had bad ones. All you can do is really hope that now we've got a new CEO, we've got a new sporting director. Hopefully they're here to stay, and this actually becomes phase 2 of this entire project once more. Chris, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you, listeners and viewers. Check out all the socials and the links below in the description, theirishmags.com, for all the latest updates and photos. We will be back next week, where we can then talk about our next game and go back to football talk.
Hooray.
It won't be long before that big bad transfer window comes around once more. Until then, how are the lads? Slán go fóill. We'll see you all very soon.
Good luck.